Greetings, brothers. Welcome to this week's tactics video. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Vanguard Veterans. Apparently, I did not include them in last week's comparison between Death Company and Sanguinary Guard. A lot of people were saying in the comments, let's hear about Vanguard Vets. They are very good at the moment. There is ways to get your characters that are leading Vanguard Vets to have AP 4. So why don't we jump into them? We'll compare them to last week's Sanguinary Guard. At the end of this video, I'll link last week's video in case you didn't see all the Death Company comparison. And we'll tell you, hopefully, so you know exactly which 10-man unit you want to put in your army list, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. So let's get into this week's tactics video. So thanks so much for being here. If we are just meeting, my name is John, and every week on this channel I'll be trying to give you some insight onto how to get the most out of your Blood Angels on the tabletop. So are Vanguard Veterans better than Sanguinary Guard at the moment? I guess here's the interesting thing, right? If you take 10 Vanguard Veterans plus the Sanguinary Priest plus the Captain with Artisan of War, obviously you would give this Captain probably a Power Fist, you are 15 points less than Dante and 10 Sanguinary Guard. So this comes in 415, Dante plus 10 Sanguinary Guard are 430. But if you do Dante plus the Sanguinary Priest plus the 10 Vanguard Veterans, this is actually the exact same price as Dante and the 10 Sanguinary Guard. So 430 points for both squads. So basically that's what we're going to be diving into today, looking at both squads, trying to figure out just exactly what is going to be best for you on the tabletop. So we looked at Dante last week. He's going to give you 1 to charge and 1 to your hit rolls, and the enemy are going to have to take a battle shock test at the start of any fight phase with -1. If the Sanguinary Guard are attached by him, he's going to be -1 to hit in melee, -1 to wound in melee, and Sanguinary Guard get OC2. Every model can now have like a plasma or infernal pistol, and 8 of the 10 will have incarnate blades, and there's a couple of power fists. If we wanted to take a captain, and the captain can lead either of those 2 units, they're going to give you 1 additional strength on the charge, which is pretty nice. They're going to let you use Rites of Battle, so once per battle round you can use a CP for free, a battle tactic. The battle tactics that stand out for Blood Angels probably be Armor of Contempt and Red Rampage. The captain can have a plasma pistol, a power fist. I guess you could put the Thunder Hammer in there if you're willing to take the -1 to hit. He can have a shield if you want him to, but the interesting thing is he can get additional AP here because you can equip Artisan of War, which gives him a 2-up save, 1 additional AP. So you go back to having an AP3 Thunder Hammer if you really wanted to. Now, if we attach 10 Vanguard Veterans to the Captain for 210 points, every model then gets lethal hits in melee in any turn that you made a charge move. The Vanguard Veterans will all have basically a melee heirloom weapon. It's called a Vanguard Veteran weapon. Strength 5, -1 damage. Every single model can have a Storm Shield, giving them all a 4-up Invan. Yes, any number of models could have Infernal Pistols, etc., etc. But I think the play here is to give them all Storm Shields. At least that's what we're seeing people do, right? Then we attach the Sanguinary Priest. The Sanguinary Priest gives a whole unit a 5-up Feel No Pain, so protection against mortals, protection against, like, dev wounds, and every unit also gets lethal hits. Sorry, every unit also gets -1 AP, which will stack with the lethal hits. So that makes the Vanguard Veterans -2 AP. It means this Priest becomes -2 AP, and it means the Captain could potentially have a -4 Thunder Hammer or -4 Power Fist, because this 1 AP would stack with Artisan of War, which would stack with his -2 AP. So 415 points for these guys, or 430 with Dante. We looked last week at what the Sanguinary Guard get with Dante, right? They get +1 to charge, +1 OC, they get this aura of battle shock test with -1. We get like 40 strength 7 attacks at 2 damage AP2. We get another 8 strength 10. We get Dante's 9 attacks at AP3. We've got that -1 to hit, -1 to wound. And then we've got 10 Infernal Pistols, which will hit on 2s, and Dante's sustained Infernal Pistol hit on 2s. So you get a lot out of the Sanguinary Guard. They are expensive, 430 points. I've now played them 3 times, actually, and I keep playing them. I do think Dante plus 10 Sanguinary Guard are fieldable. I think start them off the board, rapid ingress them in, jump forward, shoot 11 Infernal Pistols, make a charge. Remember, you got that +1 to charge. That's kind of big as well. And I guess if you can't get a good rapid ingress, you can bring them in from the Deep Strike charge. It is an 8 that you need from the charge rather than a 9 from Deep Strike, and that is a significant difference. Needing an 8 from a charge is a 66% chance with a reroll. Needing a 9 from a charge is less than 50%. So actually, his +1 to charge means if you are going to try and make those long bomb I guess a 9-inch deep strike charge, we know that's a low probability. At least it's 66% chance with Dante. Basically what it was for Blood Angels back in 9th edition. It felt way more reliable in 9th than it does now. So what are the Vanguard Veterans going to get? Well, if you got 10 of them plus the Priest plus Dante, you're still going to get the Battle Shock. You're going to still get the +1 to charge rolls. You're still going to get the +1 to hit from Dante. You're going to get lethal hits in melee because of the Vanguard Veterans. You're going to get 50 attacks at strength 7 on the charge, AP 2 1 damage, hitting on 2s. You're going to get 9 attacks at strength 9 from Dante. These will now become AP 4 because the Priest is attached, again hitting on 2s. And then you get 6 attacks for the Priest, AP 2, again hitting on 2s because of Dante. And I guess it's important to note that if you are -1 to hit on Dante or the Priest, the +1 to hit from Dante is going to cancel that out. So these guys are going to be hitting pretty reliably. The Vanguard Veterans have a 3-up, 4-up, 5-up. So that means there's a regular 3-up save, a 4-up invulnerable save, a 5-up feel no pain if they all have the Storm Shields. We only have 1 Infernal Pistol, and we have the Priest Bolt Pistol, which, I mean, the Bolt Pistol will do nothing. But you're sacrificing the 10 Infernal Pistols for the 4-up Invuln. But let's see how that works out when we actually get to do some math. So my thought is, based on this, and we talked last week about Armor of Contempt being so good, and some people said that they wanted to take Captains or the Sanguinary Guard because the Captain giving them Armor of Contempt or Red Rampage are very valuable. But Armor of Contempt actually has much less value on the Vanguard Veterans, right? Because the second you're hit with AP1, you're on your 4-up Invuln. The built-in lethals actually means that Red Rampage actually is a little bit less valuable there as well because you already have lethal hits, so your Red Rampage is only going to give you Lance. So interestingly, the Captain attached to the Vanguard Veterans may actually be less valuable. So Dante might actually be the perfect unit to lead Vanguard Veterans. A 5-up Feel No Pain means 30.5% of the time when you fail an armor save against a 2 damage weapon, you should survive. Basically what that means is 30.5% of the time when you fail the save and you've got to roll the 2 dice and you're looking for a single 5-up, statistically that is 11 out of 36. So almost, if it was 12 out of 36, it would be a third. So it's just less than a third of the time, because statistically, I guess there's like the diminishing return if you roll 2 dice and you're looking for a 5-up. But that is the math for that. So suppose like if you have to fail 10 saves against 2 damage weapons, 30% of the time you will roll a single 5-up, and then, you know, basically a 2 damage attack will only do 1, so it just takes a wound off the model rather than kills them. So if you were going to fail 10 saves on the Vanguard Veterans, i.e. the whole squad is dead, statistically 3 guys should probably still be alive, because 3 times you only did you prevented one of the damage coming in. The chance of actually rolling 2 5s up is 11%. I mean, that can happen and you can spike that. But yeah, so statistically, rolling 2 5-ups after you failed armor save so that they take no damage, that's an 11% chance. So just wanted to throw those numbers out there because I wanted to know those numbers for as we start to move through the video, so we can kind of just use them as like a base for working out how much more survivable the Vanguard Veterans are than the Sanguinary Guard. Okay, if you've got this far in the video and you feel like you have learned something or you enjoy the content that I make, then please do consider subscribing. And a big shout out, thank you to Rezio for the suggestion this week to jump into the Vanguard Veterans, because I felt like it's always nice to get feedback on a video that I've made. It's hard to include everything in a single video. Obviously, he asked for Assault Marine options as well. I mean, I think he means Assault Intercessors, but regardless, there is so much that goes into these videos, so I only do so much. But if you do have suggestions, then please keep them coming. I do try and read the suggestions every week, and if I think they're relevant and I think there's some value, then I'll put them out. So if you haven't got this far, please subscribe. Please click the thumbs up button. I appreciate everyone that does the algorithm stuff, and leave a comment down below if you've got something to tell me, or sometimes I make a mistake. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So last week I talked about things that were blowing up my Sanguinary Guard and my Death Company. I'm going to link that video at the very end. If you haven't watched it, it's probably worth a watch. I was trying last week to figure out, are Death Company or Sanguinary Guard the best unit to include at the new points costs? And I wanted to include what was blowing my units up, because Blood Angels, toughness 4, do not survive very often. They usually get killed very easily by some enemies, and these enemies were all just wrecking right through my army. Every time the Drukhari shoot, the Death Guard get in combat, the Grey Knights use their side cannons, Eldari use their devastating wood flamers, and the Orcs get in combat with like 40 power claws and the Wag. All these things just kill Blood Angels like they're going out of fashion. So let's talk about shooting then. I kept the numbers from last week. So this was the Sanguinary Guard against Warp Spiders, a couple of Venom Cannons, and a couple of Plague Spewers. And this is how much wounds they would take against these things. So if we bring in the Vanguard Veterans, the Priest and Dante, well, against something like Warp Spiders that have dev wounds, you would expect the Vanguard Veterans to be better, because they're going to get a 5-up, feel no pain against the dev wounds. Great. Against the Venoms, it's actually identical. So because the Sanguinary Guard have that better save, the worst base save, I guess, means that there's no difference. Venoms, anti-infantry Venoms, do the exact same amount of damage to Dante and Sanguinary Guard as they do against Van Vets. And I think the understanding here, at least my understanding, is because the Sanguinary Guard have that 2-up save, they're very good against low AP weaponry, and this is what a Venom is. If we talk about Plague Sprayers, the Sanguinary Guard don't do quite as well against them because they are AP 2, but I guess Vanguard Veterans do well because they can only be affected by 1 AP, because then they're on to their Invuln save, and then the 5-up Feel No Pain comes in and kicks in better. So against Sanguinary Guard are very good against AP 0, AP 1, and I guess at AP 2, that's where you start flipping over to potentially the Van Vets being better. If we do play Armor of Contempt, you can see straight away that numbers sort of normalize in terms of, like, Sanguinary Guard with Armor of Contempt are more survivable against the AP 1 again, and against AP 2, they kind of catch up. So they're against the biggest value you can get here, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that the most value you will get is by playing Armor of Contempt on Sanguinary Guard. It is very powerful on them, because if you're bringing an enemy weapon back down to AP 1, or potentially back down to AP 0, then Sanguinary Guard and Dante are very survivable. The Vanguard Veterans actually get much less value, right? Like, there's almost no point playing Armor of Contempt on these guys, right? It doesn't change AP 2 weaponry at all because of the Invuln, and I guess against AP 1 weaponry it's minor. It's like half a wound that you're saving. So I would never play Armor of Contempt, I guess, if you're being shoot by a lot of AP 1 weaponry on a Van Vet. Like, it's very minor. Right. If we talk about shooting against something with much higher AP, like a Psi Cannon, against the Vanguard Veterans are going to be ahead, and it's obvious why they're ahead, because they can only be affected by AP 1, moving from 3 to 4, and then they have a 5-up Feel No Pain. So against like a Psi Cannon, which is AP 2, the Van Vets are ahead. Again, you would expect that. If you do play Armor of Contempt on the Sanguinary Guard, then they catch right back up with the Van Vets. So again, it comes back to, if you can bring enemy AP down to AP 1, then, or AP 0, the Sanguinary Guard are very good, and that's what I was talking about last week, is nobody uses the go to ground stratagem, which gives you cover. Use that in conjunction with Armor of Contempt. Yes, it is very expensive and it is 2 CP, but if you're doing that on your Sanguinary Guard and you're bringing your enemy's attacks back to AP 1 or AP 0, then the Sanguinary Guard are actually quite survivable. So when you actually fight in melee later on, when they're -1 to hit and -1 to wound, if you're paying Armor of Contempt, they are very good. So against AP Weaponry 2 here, the Vanguard Veterans have the same level of survivability as Sanguinary Guard with Armor of Contempt. So again, it comes back to, do we just not need Armor of Contempt? Or do we just not need stratagems played on the Vanguard Veterans? And there is strength in having units that don't need strats played on them. So could this actually mean that you don't actually want a captain leading your Vanguard Vets? Maybe you want the captain leading the Sanguinary Guard because they're the ones that need Armor of Contempt. The Vanguard Veterans with Dante and a Priest just don't spend CP on them. They're doing pretty well, right? It certainly feels to me like from these numbers, the captain is less core in terms of requirements for buffing the Vanguard Veterans. Could argue the captain is more core for the Sanguinary Guard. Certainly an argument to be made. So since last time, look at the mess of the slide. I played against the Death Guard party bus. If you've not played against the party bus yet, great. If you've played against it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's basically a Rhino, which has a firing deck of 2, right? With 2 Malignant Plaguecasters inside it. So Malignant Plaguecasters have a Focus Witchfire, which is a hazardous psychic torrent. So it's basically it's a Redeemer Flamer. D6 plus 3, strength 6 minus 2. However, it is D3 damage rather than flat 2 damage. It is hazardous, but I suppose if they fail their hazardous rolls, they'll just take the mortal wounds on the Rhino. Now, the interesting thing is, Right now, it's the same as a Redeemer, basically. The only difference is rather than D3, it's the Redeemer is flat 2. You could argue flat 2 is probably a little bit more reliable, but statistically, they're kind of the same. Then, what you do is you play Ferric Blight, which basically means you can improve the AP of that attack by 1. So this Flamer would become AP 3. Remember, Death Guard can make your invulnerable save 1 worse as well if you're in contagion range. Sorry, not invulnerable save. Your regular save 1 worse, and they usually do that against Marines. So this Flamer becomes AP 4. We can pay Boil Blood, 1 Death Guard unit that's with, and choose 1 enemy within contagion range. The weapon would get heavy, but that's kind of irrelevant. It's the ignores cover. So now you're on AP 4, ignores cover, and if the enemy makes a critical wound and you're on range of an infected objective, then you become AP 5. So Sanguinary Guard, even if you played Armor of Contempt, you're only saving on 6s now. This is a problem, and this is what Death Guard have nicknamed the Party Bus. This is the ability that the Malignant Plaguecaster gets, and he can actually make it that the enemy can take -2 to their advance and charge as well, which could be hugely problematic. So this combo is a bit cheaper than the Redeemer. It has some weaknesses. Obviously, you can't use Firing Deck in Overwatch, and that is its kind of weakness. But if this thing can get the jump on you, and it will move 12 inches, and then they will flame 12 inches, so it's got a very decent range. If this thing gets the jump on you and they got some CP to spend, you could be in a whole world of hurt. And for the record, this thing shot my Sanguinary Guard. They were in cover, that was ignored. I wasn't on objective, thank God, and I played Armor of Contempt, so they hit me with ignore cover -4 AP. Armor of Contempt took it back to -3, and I spiked a bunch of 5-ups, and I still lost like 7 guys in the squad from 1 round of shooting. So this thing is brutal. It's the arch nemesis of Sanguinary Guard. And here's the numbers, right? So if you just roll an average number of 13 shots, that would be basically getting 7 shots out of your 2d6, which is totally average, plus your 6 extra, because it's d6 plus 3. At AP4, d3 damage, you're going to fail 9 unsaved wound rolls there for potentially 18 wounds. So potentially, if they rolled an average roll for every d3, they're not going to do that. I guess some are going to overroll and some are going to underroll, so they're going to end up wasting some. But the Party Bus statistically should kill about 9 9 Sanguinary Guard a turn, which is crazy. Against the Van Vets, AP4 doesn't really mean much, right? They'll just be like, yeah, sure, we've got 4-up Invuln and we've got 5-up Feel No Pain. They're actually going to only lose 7 wounds. So in this case, the Van Vets are like 250% more survivable than the Sanguinary Guard against the Party Bus. Armor of Contempt will obviously help here. Talked about it a lot. Bringing the AP down will help a lot, but you still... So when I did it this week, this is exactly what happened. I lost 7 Sanguinary Guard to the Party Bus in 1 round of shooting. Statistically, I should have lost 7.22. So this is a brutal combination that the Death Guard are using to get AP4 or AP5. I thought they made the game less lethal. They literally said that. Why have they got AP5 Flamers? I don't know, but that's what they've got. So that's what you've got to be aware of. So I guess in this case, Vanguard Veterans would be miles ahead. So I guess in situations where there is really high AP coming in, then yeah, we're going to get onto our Storm Shields, and we're going to get our Feel No Pain, and we're going to get tons of value out of that, right? But if we get into melee, and this is what I was saying about Sanguinary Guard, this is hopefully where they're going to shine, right? Because they're -1 to hit and -1 to wound. So against like a 10-man Orc Blob, the Sanguinary Guard a bit more survivable than the Van Vets. Against a bunch of Plague Marines, or Plague Marines with those heavy weapons hitting on 4s, the Van Vets actually do well against the Plague Marines because the Plague Marines have really high AP. So, and then against Eviscerators from like 8-bound is kind of statistically about the same. If we play the Armor of Contempt on the Sanguinary Guard, you can see straight away all these numbers then become better than the Van Vets. So, it's a tough one, right? Armor of Contempt obviously has huge value on the Sanguinary Guard. You almost want to be playing it every time that they're targeted. And in the shooting phase, if you've got cover or you've not got cover, you should be trying to get cover, and you could use Go to Ground to get cover. The -1 to hit, -1 wound help a lot, but I guess the second you start talking about mortal wounds or dev wounds, and the Vanguard Veterans are going to come right back up there. I guess the interesting thing, though, really, again, is the Vanguard Veterans are not going to benefit here from any defensive stratagems. So they are a unit that perform well all the time and don't need any defensive stratagems. And I think there is some strength in that. If we talk about weak AP weaponry, right, like AP1, AP2, and I've even got an AP3 example here, but low damage, like 1 damage, 2 damage, you can see the Sanguinary Guard do fairly well against the low AP stuff. They keep up with the Vanguard Veterans, and if we play Armor of Contempt, again, the Sanguinary Guard with the -1 to hit and the -1 to wound are a good bit more survivable. So the issue is, Sanguinary Guard are very survivable in melee with Armor of Contempt, but I feel like when they jump in, they're going to do enough damage to probably kill their opponent in melee, meaning they're never really going to get hit in melee all that often. So they're kind of in a weird position. They are 100% a glass cannon unit, and it feels like Vanguard Veterans are maybe not as much of a glass cannon. But there is some situations, I guess, where -1 to hit and -1 to wound are very good. For example, like 10 Drukhari Incubi with Clavies. They get a lot of attacks hitting on 3s, and they make a lot of wounds. So against the Vanguard Veterans, you actually take more, even though potentially, like, you're looking at it going, well, the Vanguard Veterans have a 4-up, so it would be the same save as the Sanguinary Guard. They also have a built-in 5-up Feel No Pain, so you would think these guys would be doing better. But when you take -1 to hit and -1 to wound, that takes their Drukhari from hitting on 3s to 4s, and it takes their wound rolls from 4s to 5s. So when you stack those two numbers together, again, Sanguinary Guard with Armor of Contempt are very, very good in melee. So then I went and just worked out the damage against all the things we talked about last week. Marines, Deathshroud Terminators, Taloses, Lords of Change, the Hecaton Rank Fortress, and I pulled the Vanguard Vets, the Priest, and Dante together against last week's numbers from the Sanguinary Guard. And then I just basically said, like, this is the numbers from last week's Sanguinary Guard. How much more damage do the Sanguinary Guard plus Dante do over the Van Vets, Priest, and Dante? So we would expect the Sanguinary Guard to do more damage in melee, and it's significant. It's down as little as 7% on the Land Fortress, but it's as high as 44% against Deathshroud Terminators. Vanguard Veterans, Dante, and the Priest will still kill a boatload of Deathshroud Terminators. If they get to do all their attacks, they're still going to kill 5.5 Terminators. And I guess no damage would be wasted there, right? Because it's all 1 damage, I suppose, apart from the Dante's attacks, whereas some of this damage would be wasted because Deathshroud Terminators have 3 wounds and all these attacks are 2 damage. So 44% is probably a bit of a lie there. It's probably more like 20%. But yes, Sanguinary Guard are a unit that are going to get great value out of the sheer number of attacks. But the Vanguard Veterans are not bad, and I guess one of the reasons they keep up is because they've got lethal hits on the whole squad. Even the Priest gets lethal hits, because that is the Vanguard's Veterans' ability when they make charges. Now, these numbers are all worked out as Strength 7, because I've purposely done Dante rather than the Captain. I think I've made a few good points as why the Captain might be the wrong choice here. There will still be value in the Captain, right? And if someone is running the Captain and doing really well with it, by all means do that. I'm just telling you that the maths that we're running here doesn't show the Captain. The free stratagem on the Captain is probably maybe not as good as Dante's +1 to charge, +1 to hit, and Battle Shock for Van Vets. So if we run Red Rampage on this, then unfortunately the Sanguinary Guard get even further ahead. And this is because Sanguinary Guard don't have lethal hits. So they're getting the benefit of lethal hits and lance, whereas the Vanguard Veterans already had the benefit of lethal hits. So they're just getting the lance numbers. So you can see here, Sanguinary Guard again benefiting massively from those extra stratagems. Red Rampage being very good on them. It still can be worth it to use Red Rampage on the Vanguard Veterans, right? I purposely had a look at like the Land Fortress. If we look before, it was 16.7, which changes to 21.5. So it's still against higher toughness stuff. It's still, Red Rampage will still increase your damage output by 28% for the Vanguard Veterans. So if you're unsure if you're going to kill somebody, it might still be worth using Red Rampage. It's just not as valuable as a Sanguinary Guard because they're getting buffs to both lethals and lance. Is the extra AP worth it on Dante? So I just basically ran the numbers against those units again, put them side by side. Last week's Dante's numbers with his AP3, this week's Dante's numbers with his AP4. So obviously that additional point of AP is only going to have effect against units that don't have invans, like a land fortress, like regular marines, and I guess the numbers there are 1 extra damage against a land fortress, 1 extra marine killed. Not really sure 1 AP on Dante is going to make a huge difference, I guess, unless you're fighting an army that has literally all lack of invans everywhere. And I guess you could probably argue the same thing as well about giving that captain the power fist, and paying the points for Artisan of War to make it an extra point of AP. If the priest's already giving you AP3, there's very little value in moving between AP3 and AP4. I guess it's only going to come up against models that don't have invans, and it's only going to come up against the models with really good saves. Anything that has like a save of like 4 up or worse is just AP3 is already going to basically make them have no save, right? So it's only going to affect models that can save on 2s or 3s, and it's not going to do enough. Like, the enemy model will have 4 saves to make where they're only saving on 6s, as opposed to the 4 saves they're going to make when they're only saving on 5s. It's very, very minor. So what are my overall thoughts on all this? Because that was a lot to digest. I realize I've gone pretty fast. Once I get through this slide, I'm going to link last week's video. So if you didn't see last week's video, you probably want to watch it now, and that'll give you the context of Death Company, Sanguinary Guard, and Vanguard Veterans. Maybe next week we can add Jump Assault Intercessors to the mix. I don't know. So we know Sanguinary Guard are glass cannon unit, right? But we know they do very decent damage. There's a real argument to using Captain with them because they need Armor of Contempt. And I think the Vanguard Veterans don't need Armor of Contempt, assuming you're arming them with Storm Shields, right? The Vanguard Veterans aren't the same type of blender as the Sanguinary Guard, though, right? Red Rampage is less valuable on them. The Captain does help bring them up to Strength 8, if you want to add a Captain to them. But the second you're fighting anything T9 and above, this changes nothing, right? And if the opponents have a bunch of tanks or demons or Catan, at that point the Captain helps them not at all, and we already said that the stratagems aren't really as valuable on the Vanguard Veteran. So I think Dante is the perfect model to lead Vanguard Veterans. Probably wouldn't have believed I'm saying that, but I think he is. And I think that would be a unit that you could run with no CP spend on it and be like, I will take my free captain somewhere else, captain with a Sanguinary Guard, and then I can spend stratagems on the Sanguinary Guard for free, and then I could spend other stratagems on the Death Company and pay my CP on that. So I'm like, Death Company getting stratagems, Sanguinary Guard getting free strats, Vanguard Veterans not needing strats. So if you're going to try to run all 3 of them, I'm not sure many people are, but if you are trying to run all 3 of them, that would probably be the way to do it. In the shooting, against anything with significant AP, i.e. more than 2, then the Vanguard Veterans are going to do much better, because they're instantly going to jump onto their invuln saves, and the party bus was a great example, whereas Vanguard Veterans are not really going to be that scared by the party bus. They're only going to lose maybe 3 models, 3.5, whereas the Sanguinary Guard are going to lose somewhere like 7 with Armor of Contempt and 9 without. 9 without, that's horrific, right? That's like 280 points of guys to 2 guys with flamers, right? It's crazy. In melee, the numbers become much closer. The -1 to hit and -1 to wound really do offset that 5 up feel no pain, and the fact that, again, Armor of Contempt being super valuable in the Sanguinary Guard make me think that like the Sanguinary Guard are really good in melee. The problem is trying not to kill your opponent, so you still are in melee and consolidating around them and preventing them to fall back. There's a lot of ifs and buts there. The Sanguinary Guard are never going to be allowed to stay in melee. Your opponent's always going to fall back from them. So, yeah, the Sanguinary Guard are an interesting one there. In some ways, if you're running a captain with a Sanguinary Guard, it might actually be better to put I think it's Icon of the Angel, the one that lets the opponents not fall back from infantry, would actually be more valuable. They have to take desperate escape attempts. That might actually be better than giving Dante 1 more point of AP or giving a captain 1 more point of AP, because those potentially are a little bit less valuable. Okay, against mortals and dev wounds, we know Vanguard Veterans are superior. It is very nice having a 5-up feel no pain against mortals and dev wounds. It can change the game, I guess, if you've got that. But the Sanguinary Guard will blend more enemies. They have more objective control because everybody has 2. And then you also have 11 Infernal Pistols. So if you are rapid ingressing 12.1 inches away in a concealed position where your opponent cannot get you, you're jumping forward 12 inches, you're shooting 11 Infernal Pistols before you even charge, then you're doing 50 or 60% more damage if you've got the CP for Red Rampage. I guess if you're running that big squad of Sanguinary Guard, a lot of your CP in the entire game are going to be spent on them. Like Rapid Ingress CP, Red Rampage CP, Armor of Contempt CP, and I guess that's why some people think that the Captain is the best choice for the Sanguinary Guard, which he possibly is, because getting all those free stratagems on them feels like it's much more valuable than the Vanguard Veterans. Hey Reziel, thank you so much for the comment. I hope this video covers what you were wanting it to cover, but I feel I prefer the Sanguinary Guard, but I can definitely see the strength in the Vanguard Veterans. Death Company might still be superior to both, right? Because they are still cheaper. 10 plus Lamartis is only 400 points. And they are all still hitting on strength 10 and re-rolling all hits. And they do have those 11 Infernal Pistols or 10 Infernal Pistols. Lamartis doesn't have one. I'm going to link last week's video above. If you didn't see it, you should watch it. And then you will have like a full picture of all 3 units. There was a time in 9th edition where I ran like all 3. I haven't been running all 3 in 10th. But there was a time when I used to run Death Company, Sanguinary Guard and Van Vets, and I liked how they all performed slightly differently. And it seems like they do. But is there space for them in your list, I guess, is the question. So that is it for this week's Tactics video, my friends. Thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. Please do some of the algorithm stuff. Anything that you would do is super appreciated. Remember, for less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can support the channel and help out with everything that I do each week. If you've got suggestions, there's a suggestions room in our Discord for future videos. I've been John, the Blood Angels Commander. I will see you next Friday for the Tactics video. Please do check out last week's video if you didn't do so. The Death Company versus the Sanguinary Guard was a really interesting comparison, and I think it probably adds some weight to this video, knowing what those guys do as well. Members get access to all the slides I make, so I can send you a link whenever you join the Discord, where you can get access to every slide. So if you want the numbers to compare and contrast, you will have them. I'll see you next week. By the blood are we made strong, my friends. Peace.